What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Fighting Game Tutorial Series, we are going to be going over tying and drawing in our game. So, if we are to end the timer on the same amount of health for both characters, then we're going to receive or result in a tie or a draw round. And you can do this either for a round or a match. Many fighting games do this differently, so you have a lot of options, a lot of freedom here. The main thing I want to cover is actually knowing when the tie or draw should occur and what we want to do with it after. I'll show you some examples. So what I am going to do is have a tie, and both of the characters are going to play an animation that's like their tie or their draw animation, and then they are going to get all their health back, and it's going to start a new round with nobody being accredited the win. So you see we have 4 seconds left in the counter on the top. And now no one did any damage, so a new fight begins. The fight text displays all that. They both shrugged. That's the animation I picked for the tie, because they're like, what's going on? And now, if I do damage, and they do damage to me, we are still at the same health. Even though we're not full health, we're still at the same health. So when the timer runs out again, we're going to draw yet again. And there we go. So, simple enough. And if I am to beat my opponent, and there we go, we'll still be accredited our win, and the fight will resume as normal. So the ties and the draws, they don't disrupt the round counter at all. You still have the same number of rounds that you are required to win. It just allows you to enter a new round. It's like no one won, we're going to enter a new round with a clean slate. That's what we're going to be implementing today. But if you want to get caught up in the series before you watch this episode, it could be useful to check out everything we've done if you want to mimic any of my other mechanics that I've implemented. We are on episode 183 of the Fighting Game Tutorial Series, and I will link you the entire playlist right here in the top right corner, so you can check out all the things that we've accomplished so far, and go over some of the stuff that we are going to accomplish in the future. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you just care about the ties and the draws, I would recommend you watch this episode right here, which covers match flow. This will be important for certain mechanics in this episode, such as the match state, where we're going to set it to be the tie state. That way we know how to end the round and put our characters into the proper animation. With all that said, we can go ahead and get started. So, this is a code and blueprint tutorial. We're going to start in the code, and specifically we want to go to our fighter template game mode.h. Now in the game mode, I had an eMatch state enum, which covered all of the different states our match could be in. So we had no state, which is if we were on a menu, stage intro, so when we're playing the stage preview to the users and to the players, the character entrances, when the match is doing the ready fight text, when the match is actually active, when a round ends. I've added a new one today, similar to round over, that I've called round over draw. And what this is when we finish the round, but due to a draw or a tie, we go to this match state instead of the regular round over match state. Then I have my remaining ones, which is match over, character defeat, character victory, and match results. But today, the only one we need to worry about is adding this round over draw, because we are going to use it, and it is going to help us play the animations and get our timing correct for our draw or tie match flow. Now, after adding that, let's scroll down to our functions, and I'm going to make a new one for a round draw. So we had round 1 and match 1 in the game mode, but we didn't have any way to tie or draw the round before. So we're going to add a function that covers this as well. As the comment says, the round was tied or drawn, but neither character has won or lost. The round is over. I made it a U function, blueprint callable, so we can call it from the blueprints. This is going to be important because we are going to call it from our default game mode BP. And I've called the function void round draw. Simple enough. Now let's go into the fighter template game mode.cpp. Let's scroll down to our function, or where we want to add our function, and let's make this one right here. Void a fighter template game mode, : round draw. Now the logic we're going to do in this function is pretty simple. basically, if we've drawn, I am resetting the time, because currently in the series, the timer would remain at 0 until a character fell below another character's health. So basically, one character had to beat the other. But since we have this tie and draw system in, if we leave the time at 0, it is going to continuously loop and keep drawing and keep tying the rounds, which would be pretty funny, and it would not allow us to actually finish the fight. So we want to make sure that when we draw the round, we reset the time. I'm going to reset it to whatever the maximum time for that round was. So in my case, I have a settings menu, and the settings menu has a preferred round time. That's what we store in the base game instance. So for modes where the round time is not forced to a specific value, the players can choose what round time they would like to have for their matches. In this case, we want to set the round time of the current game mode equal to that setting that they have chosen. To do this, I'm going to need my game instance, so I'm going to do an if check and create a base game instance variable. I'm going to grab the game instance of the world and cast it to our specific game instance type, which is our U-base game instance. If this cast succeeds, it will be set to this variable. Then the if statement checks if this variable is valid, so if it's not null, and that means we can actually use the base game instance. So when we go into the if statement, we set our round time of the game mode equal to our base game instance round time. Just to show you, round time is a float that I have in my game mode right here. And it even says in the comment, this can be overwritten by the value in the base game instance. So base game instance.h also has a round time, but this is not the current round time. This is the round time setting. So there we go. That's how that works. Now, after we've updated the round time, we also want to update the match state to match the current state. So when we call our win round or round 1 functions, we end up setting the match state to round over. But we don't want to do that because we may want to have specific logic on a draw or on a tie that we don't have when a character wins the round. And you could write tie or draw to the screen, or sometimes I've seen no contest, something like that. You could write different messages to the screen when they draw and have them play different animations. For us, I'm not doing different messages, I'm just having them play a specific animation, which is, again, that little shrug animation. But that is still enough reason for us to use the match state. So I'm going to take our match state of our game mode, and I'm going to set it to eMatch state, : E round over draw, which is the new one that we made in today's episode. Now, since we're not calling the win round function where we reset the character's health, I'm going to manually call reset character health here. Reset character health is a function I have in my game mode, and I can use it to quite literally reset the character's health, so we can fill them back up after they have lost it. Useful for doing so after a round has finished, but in this case, I want to start both the characters at the maximum health that they can have, not just leave them where they are. So that's optional. If you want to leave the characters with the health that they already had during the tie, you can do so. But I'm going to reset them so that they have full health and can have a full fight again. At this point, our round draw function is complete, so we can finish up in the code and we can go into the blueprint. So we're going to go into the editor, and specifically we want to go to our game mode BP. It's default game mode BP. Now in here, there's a lot going on, but you don't have to worry about most of this. All we care about for today's episode is our event BP tick. We have a blueprint tick so that we can do some certain blueprint operations that we don't do in the code. Before we go into the logic that I want to go over for today's episode, I just want to say that I will be converting this BP tick into the code tick and getting rid of this because I'm progressing further in online play, and any drawbacks I see by doing things in blueprint over code, I'm going to try and replace the blueprints with code. So just keep that in mind that we may do that in the future, but it's still good to keep going how we're going, adding things to the blueprint, because we are going to have a much easier time just copying it over, converting it from the blueprint to the code, than trying to change the blueprint and the code at the same time. Be easier to have everything that we want in the blueprint, then convert it to code in one go. But moving forward, so in our blueprint tick, we were checking to see if the timer should count down. And if it should, we have the ability to time out. So we were counting down the timer, and eventually, once it fell below the minimum, which is 0.0, we were defaulting the round time to 0.0, and then we were calling the time over function, which is a function we made in our default game mode BP. So if we go into the time over function, we were setting the timer to not be active anymore, and then we were checking which player had won, or which character had won. So if player 1 had more health remaining, they had won the round. But if player 2 had more health remaining, then they had won the round. We had a false here. After checking player 1 and player 2, if they both returned false, we weren't doing anything. That's because if player 1 didn't win and player 2 didn't win, then nobody won, so we can't call win round on anybody. So instead, we're going to call our round draw function right there. That is why we had it blueprint callable in the code. So drag off this false and just search for round draw. Should come up right away. And you'll get this node right here. So if the time ends and neither player 1 nor player 2 has won the round, we'll consider it a tie or a draw. Simple enough. Now, that is going to do the logic that we have in the code, and that is going to set the match state to be round over draw. But that doesn't really mean anything to our game yet. We don't use it anywhere. So what we need to do is now tell the characters to play the corresponding animation or do the corresponding action. In my case, I want them to play the shrug animation, and once the shrug animation is finished, then we are going to start the next round. Same for how we do like the round lost. So when a character gets knocked down, when they start standing up again, then we start the next round. We're going to do a very similar method as we did for that. So let's go into our mutant anim BP, or your character's animation blueprint, and let's go into the state machine. I know this is really messy, but there's only one thing that we need to actually update today. I am going to add this new state called round/match draw. I'm going to right click and add a new state, and I'm going to call this round and match draw, and you'll get what I have here. Now, if I go into this state, I have an animation called mutant draw, and it is just the mutant shrugging. It's a very simple animation. It's a little long, so probably could cap it right around there. And now I have this animation. Mutant shrugs, and then they're all finished. Now, this animation should not be set to loop because we don't want to have the mutant keep shrugging once the round is drawn. Doing it once is perfectly fine, then they can return to their idle. So make sure the loop animation is off. Now, going back into the state machine. Right now, I've only connected it from idle and connected it to idle. So we can only reach this state if we're in the idle state, and we can only return to the idle state from it. But if you want, you could have it go from pretty much any state, because you're just going to cancel out of the animation you're in and go into the round, match, and draw. So drag off your idle and make a new transition from idle to round, match, draw. And here is my transition rule for it. You can see I don't have any events on it or anything like that. Go into it, and the transition rule is actually going to check the game mode reference, not something on the character, but we're going to see if we're in the round over draw state. So if the match state is equal to round over draw, then we know that we want to play the draw or tie animation on the characters themselves, on both characters at the same time. Now, I already have a game mode reference in my animation blueprint, but if you don't have it, it's very easy to get. You can go to your event graph. And for me, it happens to be set right here. So in my blueprint update animation, I check the game mode reference, and if it's not valid, I get the current game mode, cast it to my game mode type, and then set that to the reference. If it is valid, I skip it because I don't want to keep overwriting the game mode on every blueprint update animation call. That's basically the tick for the animation blueprint. And so game mode reference, I grab our match state variable that we had set in the code just earlier, and I check if it is equal enum for the type that I am interested in. And in this case, it is round over draw that I'm checking for. then that goes directly into my result node. So if the match state is equal to this, we can transition from idle to our draw animation. Now, once we get into the draw animation, I have a new event. This event is what's going to determine when we want to start the next round. We could start it immediately, but we did the round lost a very similar way where, again, we waited for the character to start getting up. We're going to do that here too. So we're going to wait until they've at least entered their tire draw state, as that should give them enough time to finish their animation before the next round begins. That way nobody is put at a disadvantage. So if I click on my draw state here, I have an entered state event, custom blueprint event that I've added here called prepare next round after draw. And this is something I just made up, so you can name it whatever you want, but basically this is going to do our logic for actually starting the next round once a tie or a draw has occurred. So once we go into our event graph, we can now add this event. I've already done it here. You can simply search for the name to get this, so mine was called prepare next round after draw. And I could use the event and notify prepare next round after draw to get this node right here. Now at this point, what I want to do is trigger my new round messages, which is my fight text. Additionally, this does some other stuff because of the specific timing we set up in the match flow episodes. So it also plays the fight sound effect, resets character health, and hides the text after 1 second, officially starting the round. So going into our animation blueprint, we can call this function, which will basically take care of everything we need. Everything for the new round setup is already done. And so our work isn't very hard today. We're going to grab our character reference that we have for our animation blueprint, which is the owner of the AnimP. And that has a HUD reference, so we can get the HUD reference from it. And HUD is where we trigger the new round messages, so we can just drag off the HUD reference and call that function. And that's literally it. Now, I did notice while I was doing this that reset character health is actually done in this function. So when I was doing it in the code, that's not really required. We're just doing it twice at this point. I'm going to take it out of the code. I had it in there, and it worked, but there's no reason to call that function twice. We're then resetting character health twice. So I'm just going to ignore that in round draw. Not going to call the reset character health function. I'm going to let the health fill up once we trigger the new round messages. Alright, and now at this point, our new round can start when this anim notify fires, but our character that is shrugging or doing their draw animation can't return to idle just yet. So let's go back to the state machine and let's go to round match draw and drag into the idle and make a new transition rule. That'll be this one right here. And I don't have any events on this either, but I do make sure that it is automatic rule based on sequence, player, and state. And you guys are probably tired of hearing it if you watch the series. But basically what this means is that if there are no other suitable transition rules, it will automatically take this one once this animation completes. So once the character finishes their draw or tie animation, they will then automatically return back to idle. Alright, so if we now go into our game, we should be able to do everything we saw in the demo. So I'll load up a stage, and if we tie with the same health at the very end, then we should do a draw or a tie animation, and the round should start shortly after. Do the same damage on each character. Then we will sit here and wait for the remaining time to run out. And another note, you'll notice that I've added an outline to the timer as well as the ready and fight text. I did that just by adding the outline settings in the HUD. So if you want to update yours, feel free to do that. I think it looks a little bit nicer. There we go. We're shrugging. It says fight. As soon as we come out of the animation, we're back in our idle and we can fight again. And everything is working as intended. Now, one thing that we can do that we might not want to be able to do is move while we are in our shrug state. And so if we are holding a direction, when we go into the state, you'll see we are able to move during that. We can solve this pretty easily. by implementing a method in our animation blueprint that does something very similar to how we handle our attacks. Now, notice this isn't the only way to cover this or handle this, but this is one method that we can do, and it's very quick and easy. So in idle to round tie or draw, we can call our start attack transition event, which should already exist if you've been following the series. It is the same event that we use when going from idle to light attack. You see we call start attack transition in there, and we're going to call it an idle to round match draw. Now additionally, round match draw to idle has end attack transition called, and that is the same event that we call from light attack to idle. So what these events do is disable certain actions like movement and other attacks while we're in that animation. Doing this for our round match draw animation and idle transitions is going to allow us not to move or attack while in the draw animation. Now if we play a match and we wait until the very end, we will be able to test this out, and you should see that you shouldn't be able to move or attack during the draw or tie animations, which is exactly what we want. There's one more thing that I found while playing this that I think we should adjust, and that is the match counter going up when winning due to a timeout. So if a player is to win due to a timeout, at the current state, the round counter won't actually fill in, and the player won't actually be able to see their wins, although it does count. So you'll see here, player 1 won due to timeout, and we can see the round counter. Now let's do the opposite. We'll check for player 2, and then you'll see what the current issue is in the series. So player 2 is going to win due to timeout. Skip ahead here. And player 2 has won due to the timeout, but the round counter isn't updated. We can go ahead and fix this quickly. We can go to our game mode BP in the blueprint. When we go to our timeout function, where we just called the round draw function earlier, we can go to this section where we have player 1 win round, and we want to call round 1 in the game mode instead of the individual character win round function. So search for round 1 and pass in the corresponding character into the winning character. So player 1 into winning character. We want to replace win round with the round 1 using player 1 as the winning character reference. Going to clean this up a little bit, and that will work for player 1, but we do need to do this for player 2 as well. So let's clean up player 2's area here and get ready to put this in. So organize this a little bit better. This way we can put this node in here. And you'll see we have the player 2 win round function call here. At this point, we want to call our round 1 function using player 2 as the winning character, so we're going to go ahead and put this in here. Again, I'm going to clean everything up just a little bit. And just to show you, the round 1 function does in fact call the win round function that we just replaced, so we're not taking away any logic, we're actually doing a bit more. And this will do things like notify the round end and update the HUD round icons, which we're going to want. There you go, guys. That's everything I got for you today. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, and please consider supporting me on Patreon or YouTube membership if you haven't already. Additionally, I'd love to thank my Patreon members and YouTube membership subscribers. Thank you guys for all the love and support you've shown, and for continuing to keep this series alive and giving me great ideas to work on that you are all interested in seeing. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I would be happy to assist you with any problems you had, and that is completely free. But anyway, guys, that's all I got. Like I said, I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.